We will be looking at two different passages today, one from Jesus and one from the Apostle Paul. And both of them are going to be tied together with this idea of patiently waiting for the harvest to come. But before we do, let me kind of give you a little bit of an interactive activity for a moment. Have you ever seen those things where you're shown these two different pictures and you're supposed to spot the difference? I'm not very good at them, but here, let's see how good you are. Okay, I'm just going to have these two pictures up here on the screen, and I just want you to see if maybe you can spot how many differences there are. I'm going to give you a few seconds right here. I've been having it up on the screen for about 12 seconds already. So, how many have you got? Like I said, I'm not very good at it. Well, I have to tell you something about this picture right here. These pictures. This is not entirely fair because they are the exact same picture. So if you looked at there and you're like, oh, that's different than that one. No, actually, I literally copy and pasted them one right after the other. But maybe that's why I'm not so good at spotting the difference, right? I really am not all that great at spotting those differences because it takes so much time and effort to be able to see. Sometimes it's only a very small difference in the two. Well, sometimes things might look the same on the outside, but they really are two different things. Let's look at a parable that Jesus gives us. In Matthew chapter 13, beginning in verse 24, Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from? An enemy did this, he replied. The servants asked him, Do you want us to go and pull them up? No, he answered, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, First collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring them into my barn. Okay, so let's take a look at this parable together. So, for starters, what is this parable about? I mean, verse 24 tells us it's about the kingdom of heaven and how it's like this man who sowed this good seed in this field, right? So, all of this is about the kingdom of heaven. And really, a big question in this interaction comes all down to verses like 24 right here, and then verse 25. We see this big question is, how did the weeds sprout from that good seed? Well, it's because of this enemy, right? This enemy that came in and that did this in the middle of the night while everybody was sleeping. And that's why, at some point they started to realize the difference, but by the time they noticed the difference, it was a little bit too late. And for this, let's take a look a little bit about these plants right here, because yes, this translation, it talks about the weeds, and then it talks about wheat right here. Yes, those two words sound alike, so I kind of do like that from a literary perspective to have weeds and wheat because those two sound similar. But if you look at what those two words that are used to describe, I'm going to show you a source real quick. This source is from it's actually a net bible and it's their notes. This I just want to show you about this really cool resource. You can go to the netbible.org and you'll pull up these things. So on the left hand of the page you have this text, and then you have a little footnote here that is 38. So it tells us something about what this type of actually plant would have been. So this plant, this type of weed, it would have had a similar appearance to wheat. In fact, sometimes it was even called false wheat, but it was poisonous. Now, see, that's something that you don't even necessarily get from the text. I mean, the original audience would have understood that, okay? So Jesus talking, they would have understood the significance. But, for us, okay, it's been translated into another language, so, we might even miss that. So this is not only just kind of a bad thing, it could be a dangerous thing to have poison among the wheat. I mean, you're supposed to eat wheat, right? At least, I mean, the animals at least are going to be eating the wheat. And then to have poison among it, that's not a good sign at all. Now, let's go back to that parable here. Going back to this parable, you see that an enemy is the one who sowed the bad seed. And then you might think, well, okay, if the enemy has sowed the bad seed, okay, just pull it up and get rid of it. I mean, that's what the servants say in verse 28. Do you want us to go pull it up too? But no, no, not so fast with that. Don't just pull it up and get rid of it, because the master has a plan right here. The plan that the master is having is, and he gives this example here in verse 29. He tells us why. He says, no, don't just pull it up, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. See, the wheat is so important. In fact, it's too important to possibly harm while taking out the weeds. That is a very powerful message, right? Unless you're only just thinking that we're actually talking about weeds and wheat and all, because this is a parable. When Jesus spoke in parables, he always had another meaning behind it. They were different symbols and they represented stuff. So what are we looking at here with this? I mean, we know it's about the kingdom of heaven, but what about the seed? What about the wheat, the weeds? What are we actually talking about right here? Well, this is one of these parables that Jesus explains it, because apparently the disciples needed explanation. So in beginning in verse 36, going down through verse 43, then he left the crowd and went into the house. And his disciples came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. So apparently they didn't quite get it. Okay, verse 37. He answered, the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be in the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear. So, when we look at all the bad in the world, perhaps if we look at bad people who are in the world, just know that this is part of God's plan. This whole parable, we're not talking about plants. We're talking about people, people of the kingdom, people of the evil one. And we're talking about what's going to happen at this harvest time, at the end of the age. We see that the devil has sown some corruption in here. He's caused some problems, right? When you look at it in verse 41, it says that they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. Now, I don't know if you necessarily want to take that there's two different things here, that it's the people who do evil. Yes, okay, they're going to be weeded out of the kingdom at some point in the future. That's what verse 41 says. But are we actually looking at something else in addition to that? It's not just the people who will be weeded out of the kingdom, but also in verse 41, everything that causes sin. Maybe it's not just people. Maybe it's everything that causes sin, even within us. Now, that's kind of an interesting thought, really. That's almost even a redemptive thought whenever you start to understand about how the bad in the world, yes, it is in the world right now. And yeah, that's the world in which we live. But this is all part of God's plan. God has an ultimate plan in it. And we see that ultimately the wheat, the ones who are the righteous ones in verse 43, the ones who are the people of the kingdom in verse 38, they are this focus, and God has a plan for them, for us. It's a neat idea to think that even, we will be redeemed, that we will be cleansed, that everything that causes sin will be done away with at some point in the future, at the end. But right here and now, we see that, yeah, that's not exactly the world in which we live. But there's going to be a time whenever the righteous are going to be able to shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Now, that kingdom is going to be a beautiful picture in the future, whenever it has all these bad things, all these evil things taken out of it entirely. But for right here and right now, it's not quite the world in which we live. Now, maybe we can also look at another passage, because I said one passage we're going to be looking at comes from Jesus. The next one is from Paul. So Paul, he's going to put it in a slightly different way, but let's take a look at what he says in Romans chapter 8. I believe he's talking about the same type of thing, generally speaking, but he has a totally different way of explaining it. In Romans chapter 8, verses in 15 and 16, we read this, that the Spirit you received does not make you slaves so that you will live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. So now, like I said, Paul has a totally different way of looking at it. he is saying, look, the spirit that you received, it doesn't make you slave. He's talking about how we are adopted to this sonship. So he's bringing in this idea, if you will, going back to Moses, whenever they were in the land of slavery, right? In the land of Egypt, right? So when Moses brought the Hebrews through the Red Sea, were they free? Well, I mean, yes and no, right? They already were free, but they were not yet totally free because they hadn't entered the promised land. Well, we are currently living whenever the wheat and the weeds are mixed within the kingdom. Whenever we see this, that yes, okay, the spirit that we received, we've gone out of the land of slavery, okay? So we've already crossed that. We've gone through the Red Sea. But we see that just like they had to go all the way into the promised land even after that, they hadn't quite gotten their total freedom. That is kind of the way in which we live now. But the Spirit that we have received, He has brought about our adoption to sonship. So we're already starting to experience these things. A way that a lot of times people who write about these things, write commentaries and stuff, they will say that already and not yet. Because that is so oftentimes the case. Because we've already started to experience some of these blessings, but we're not yet completely where we're going to be in the future. But that is the way of the world in which we live right now. But it's also the way that God is working through it. God has a plan in all of this. Take that parable from Jesus and take this story that Paul is mentioning and combine the two together to see they're talking about the same thing. Paul goes on in verses 18 through 21. Paul says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Hold on just a moment. Pause with me on verse 18. Our present sufferings. Think with me, if you will, of everything that you know about the Apostle Paul. He suffered a lot. In fact, just today I was reading one of the letters that Paul wrote with my family, and he wrote that letter from prison. In fact, he wrote a lot of the letters that he wrote from prison. He had to go through all different types of suffering. Now, he didn't do anything wrong to be thrown in prison, except he was a follower of Christ. Because of that, he was put in prison. He went through a lot of sufferings. But he says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. What type of glory is he talking about? Verse 19. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. So now we see that, yes, God has a plan for us. And this life right now, it has a big purpose, a big reason, everything about it, even if we don't necessarily always understand that. And here, in what Paul is getting at in Romans 8, is that creation itself is awaiting the children of God to be revealed. I mean, creation itself benefits in some way. That's what it states in verse 21, that creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay. So that's going to be that freedom, right? And brought into the freedom and the glory of the children of God. There's a huge difference between being liberated from bondage to decay and then freedom and glory of the children of God. But creation itself is mentioned as those things. See, Paul has this big idea that it's not just about us as an individual, but it's about all of creation. There's going to be a redeeming quality that is going to be revealed through us, through the children of God, through those who are righteous, as used in the parable with Jesus, the people of the kingdom. Paul says just a little bit more that we're going to look at. Verses 22 through 25. He says that we know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we are saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not yet have, we wait for it patiently. So as you look at this passage, we see that, yes, creation itself is awaiting the people of God to be revealed. But, we ourselves, we already have this first fruit of the Spirit within us. Yes, we are waiting for this adoption of sonship, this redemption of our bodies. Not just all of creation, but, also, yes, specifically, individually, the redemption of our bodies as well. And it's in this hope that we are saved. Now, that means that yes, we're saved and we're brought through those things, but it's kind of like that already, not yet. Okay? Remember that. We already are saved. We already have this hope, but we're also not yet fully where we're going to be in the future. So in this hope we are saved, yes. We still are called to follow Jesus in this life. And we still are called to, as verse 25 says, that we wait for it patiently. So right here and now, we might ask God why there's this combination of the wheat and the weeds that grow together. But remember, from what Paul said in Romans 8, verse 28, verse 18, that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. And he said in verse 25 that we wait for it patiently. And as Jesus said, the hope that we will one day see at that final harvest. In Matthew 13:43, he says that the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father, in the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. Those are all the same thing. And we see that that's what Jesus was talking about. So if we will follow him and be a part of those who in this hope we are saved, we will see the redemption of our bodies. We will be able to be like the righteous and be able to shine like the sun. I don't know what that's going to look like. Just, all we can do right now is use our imagination to even imagine what that's going to be like. But I do know it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. So right now, we wait patiently for that harvest in the future because we know great things are coming to those of us who are in Christ Jesus.